We're live. Unfinished project, you lost. Let's see, who all's in here? We've got Ron English. Ron got his shirt. Right on. Unfinished project is here. Big Block 402 says part 2 on ethanol. I'll be listening. Cool. T's Good Time Garage says might have to miss tonight, but if you do, you probably want to watch it later. Last time was a great time. Pure Pontiac Garage has added John after it. I'm assuming that must be his name. Auto Salvage Outlaw is here. Twisted Mopar Garage, Dennis. Scarlet the Four-Eyed Cuda. Mostly Old Parts Wrong Ward. In the house. Unfinished Project is letting us know about a channel with a 78 Dodge and a 68 GTO. That sounds mildly conflicted and interesting at the same time.
It's not that far from my house.
Yeah. Colleen Tebow is here. NSB Custom Cars. My mom is here. Oh, look at that. Look how fancy that is. I had never seen this. So apparently my mom needed a new avatar there. But that's Jethro, so I'm going to assume people know that. Andrew Nelson is here. JB's Little Shop. Mohawk 62.
Racer.
Yep, Racer Ray.
38's here.
Yep, good deal, good deal. Buck is here. There we go. He's not first or last. Mater's Workshop. Well, cool. Glad all you guys could make it. I remember last time we had an ethanol-themed live with Thump Er. It was just fascinating, and I probably have more people watch that on replay probably than any of the other ones. So it was just really good. It's interesting, informative, and I figured we would come back with this topic again. That was probably, what, a year and a half, 2 years ago or something, wasn't it? It's been a while.
I think it was 2 years ago.
Something like that, yeah. My aunt is here. She's listening today. Well, cool. So for those of you who don't recognize the fellow on the right, this is the infamous Thump Er, the sweaty fat guy. This is him. It's very rare to sight him in the wild, but we see him in the comments quite regularly.
Yeah, you can tell how fat I am.
Yeah.
I got the pudgy cheeks.
Kind of a misnomer. But we've got him cornered here for a little while. Yeah. Which one's a sweaty fat guy? Well, I'll take the fifth on that, J-Bo.
How about both?
No, we got him cornered, and we want to get into some ethanol stuff. Last time it was just so interesting. It's a topic that keeps recurring because as more and more people are running high compression engines, they're wanting alternatives to race gas and lots of other reasons. We're starting to see ethanol come around. So I figured it would be a good time to have you on. So thanks for being willing to join us tonight. And I'm going to leave it up to you, whatever you want to get into, whatever you want to start with. And the floor is yours to talk about anything ethanol.
All right. Well, first thing I'm going to do is send a shout out to one of my buds that does carburetors, Mark Sullins. You can find him on Facebook. He has the best E85 page on Facebook. And if you want a carburetor, he does the best ones. So he can make it run right and make more power than just about anybody else. He's really good at what he does. And since I put it on his page, a link to this, he was like, give me a shout out. I'm like, okay, I'll give you a shout out.
Cool. Yeah, for sure. So I guess the one thing that'd be good to just start is, what would make a person want to start running ethanol that's been putting gasoline in their tank for 40, 50 years? What's a good reason to switch for say one of their vehicles they want to do something
after 40 or 50 years of running gas? You're going to want to change the tank because it'll be just full of varnish. Unless you've been running 10%. Yeah. Well, let's say that you're like me and you don't have a lot of money. You want to drive old hot rods and you're like, well, I can't really drive my pump gas car that gets 12, 20 miles to the gallon with $5 a gallon E7 octane or $6 a gallon, 93. Right now, 93 is like 420 here. So it's a little bit nuts. And, so why not just make your own or get some E85 and run lots of compression? Because, E85 is always cheaper unless they're pricing it wrong. Because like I drive down to Wisconsin, 87 octanes like 3 something, or it was last time I was there, and 85 was 267 a gallon in Wisconsin, and then in Nebraska it was like 240 when I filled up a couple barrels. So it's cheaper and it runs better, makes a lot of power, runs cooler, tons of fun stuff with it.
How does the cost compare when you adjust the volume of it you use to what it cost?
Well, it depends. If you're going to put it in your 8-to-1 engine, you're going to use a lot more of it. If you have a 12-to-1 or more, you're going to get the same mileage or better mileage on alcohol than you will on gas. Because the compression makes a difference. You're working the fuel harder. If you're not working it as hard, you're not getting as much out of it. So, like my Pontiacs are torque engines, right? So you want to make as much torque as possible at the lowest RPM, or the RPM range where you're using it the most, right? So we don't make torque at 6,500 RPM and go for a big horsepower number. We make torque from idle to 5,500. And then we just gear it so it stays in that, and we just work it, right? So ethanol tends to make most power under 3,000 RPM. You'll pick up a bunch under 3,000. And where do most daily drivers spend their life?
Right
under
there.
3,000, right? So it makes a little bit above 3,000, and go up to like 10, 15 horse at 6,000 RPM. 15 horse just by swapping fuel, that's kind of a decent thing, because you usually got to put a bit more money into it to get 10, 15 horse out of something. And let's see. The Pontiacs making the torque on the bottom like that makes them lend themselves really well to run an ethanol. Small block Chevy that needs a lot of RPM, it's not going to like it as much because you don't really make much torque on the bottom. You got to spin the snot out of them to gain power. You got to have a lot of gear. They'll still work. They'll still like it, and you can just crank the hell out of the compression. You can run 26-to-1 compression on straight ethanol. So you can put it in a diesel, get rid of the mechanical injection, put EFI on it, and then a carburetor, or spark ignition actually, so it'll actually light, because ethanol doesn't like to light by squeezing it hard. It wants the spark. It won't go unless there's a spark, unless you put something else in it, like gasoline that just says, oh hey, we'll just go off now. Gasoline's kind of like, I'm warm, I'm squished, I'm gonna go off, and then there's the spark. It's a little late. So that's how you tend to knock ring lands apart and flatten up rod bearings and things like that. But E85, you can go 16-to-1 with a decent tune. 13-to-1, it's just like you can run E70 with 13-to-1, and it's like not going to care. It's going to run the same as it would on E90 or E100. So 13-to-1, no problem. 16-to-1, you kind of want to have more ethanol, but you can still do it with E70.
You'd like to see old Just Beau Parjo there make something that runs on ethanol. I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Who in the chat wants to see Joe do his next build running ethanol? Get with Thump Er on the tune. Boy, wouldn't that be interesting?
How much compression can you get out of one of those? Because I can get 13-to-1 without a dome, with a flat top, just by milling it and putting it on a 455.
Yeah, Mohawk would like to see that. Yeah, I just throwing the idea out there.
And I can hook up Joe with my buddy. Now I forgot his name again. Who did I mention?
Your carburetor man,
Mark.
Sullen?
Yeah, Mark Sullins. I can hook him up with Sullins and be like, hey, he'll get you a carburetor. He won't get it to you for free, but he'll get you a carburetor.
So you want to run it because you can run a lot more compression. You can make more torque. It's like race fuel, but doesn't cost anywhere near. Well, so compare the cost of it to race fuel.
Oh, geez. What's race gas now? $12?
Yeah.
$13. C16's like 20 or something. And it's comparable to C16 for how it runs. So you can get $2.50 a gallon E85, or you can have $20 a gallon C16.
What are your top
which one are you going to go?
benefits? So what will be your top benefits? One, you can make more power without having to spend the money on the fuel. What will be some other benefits, some reasons a person might want to evaluate that for their next build?
Well, the big thing for me, the whole reason that I got into it was $5 a gallon 87 octane and 70 GTO that had 8-to-1 compression and got 18, 19 miles to the gallon if I babied it, with overdrive and 293 gears, where it actually ran 1260s like that. But anyway, I wanted to be able to make a fuel rather than buy a fuel. That way they couldn't, price me out of the market or make it so that I couldn't afford to drive my hot rods and I'd have to, get something else, or God forbid, go EV and get burned on the highway around here.
That's a good point, because back when fuel spiked back then, I know when you're talking about, back when fuel spiked back then, we didn't know what the future would hold. We didn't know if it would go to $10 a gallon or anything like that. I was actually looking around passively saying, if I find one of those little Volkswagen Rabbit trucks, I might just do a Greasel or something.
Yeah. And the cool thing, you can make ethanol out of any starch or sugar. So there's a really cool thing that you can do. Hemp, right? That Trump just legalized, that we can actually grow it and cultivate it now. Hemp grows like crazy. It's a friggin' weed, and it makes all these little seeds. Now, the cool thing is you can take the hemp themselves, the plants themselves, turn them into textiles. You can make rope or clothing or whatever you want out of it. Really strong, doesn't mold, awesome little plant for making textiles. But the seeds you can press, heat them up and press the oil out of them and run that into diesel. Then you can take what's left of the seeds and then use that to make ethanol. So you can make two fuels from hemp. So it's really kind of a cool plant.
Well, George Washington was a hemp farmer. So that hemp has come around in a long circle. I actually know some people who grew hemp. It's just interesting times. So if Unfinished Project, if you could find the link for Mark Sullins to pop up for Infamous Nova, that would be cool. But Joe has a question, and I guess we'll just start digging on this for questions. What do you recommend for the off season? I hear I guess meaning ethanol, is terrible sitting in carbs all year. You can tackle that one any way you want to.
Well, I don't think I have the picture. Let me check. I'll check and see if I got the picture of the carburetor, because I swapped, or converted a Q-Jet in 2007. It was the first one I did, and I ran it on the GTO for 5 years, 6 years, something like that. And then I pulled it off and, let it sit, and then put it back on another car shortly after that. And I took a picture of it one year, 2016, before I put the EFI on the 65 goat. I had that Q-Jet sitting there, and I'd been moving the goat around, in the yard, not really driving it because the electrical system and suspensions need work. But I was moving the goat around. The 85 was just sitting in the tank from 2014 to 2016, and I would start it up and move it around. And when I got the snow off the car that year, I pulled the top off of the carburetor and I looked down in it, and it was like absolutely spotless. There was nothing in it. So if you find white chalky stuff or that yellowish gel waxy crap that they have in it, that's an additive. And that's from the oil companies putting stuff in it to cause problems. Like the link I sent you earlier about Jeff Smith and his fuel, because Jeff does on all cylinders for Summit Racing. And let's see, what's this video? Is this the carburetor?
85 Q-Jet.
And
that's one that I was working on.
I know for sure these pictures were in the last live we did together. So
Yeah,
what I'll do is I'll put a link to that below this so that if anybody wants to watch the last time you were on, we can put that link up. And I'll put any other links related to this in there at the end of the day.
The further south you go, the more additives you get in the fuel. I get fuel in Wisconsin. There's hardly any in it. I get it from Nebraska. There's a lot in it. And if I get it in Texas, it's like, it's kind of crazy. You can watch the stuff. You can just watch the white stuff form on the sides of the barrel. It's nuts. They just put an incredible amount of stuff in it the further south you go. So you get it further north, not a problem. No, the ethanol is different than what they run on Circle Track. That's methanol. Ethanol is the same thing you get in bars, whiskey, wine, vodka, beer, yada, yada, yada. And methanol will kill you. It's like what they put in windshield washer fluid. That's methanol. Heat is methanol. And I actually had a picture of that too on the other one. Methanol's looks like this, right? Just 3. And then the ethanol has this with another one behind it and a link to it. So it looks like
the
a little
molecule
dog.
in the thumbnail is ethanol.
Yeah.
BNR says he sees merit to what you're saying about that the further south you go, the more additives you have.
Yep.
But you're saying that the additives are what cause the corrosive problems, not the ethanol itself.
Yep. It the additives are what cause the problems. And the way Jeff Smith put it was he said that they put that stuff in there to dissuade people from using it because they don't want them to quit using gasoline. Because once you start running it, if you start making it and running it and you're getting a high proof like I can, you're going to be like, I don't even need gasoline. Holy smokes, this stuff runs great.
I'll say hi to Bigfoots and Mopars, Unity Motorsports Garage. Had a few folks drift in here. BNR's asking a question. Is E85 a dry fuel like methanol?
I ran it straight with 1969 Pontiac heads, and I beat the living hell out of the thing. And they don't have hardened seats in 69. No problem there. It did have bronze valve guides, but that's just because I do that on all my engines. Stainless valves, bronze guides. Why mess around? Just do it. But it doesn't really have a problem. Although the mechanical injection on a diesel, it needs to have the oil in it because it uses the fuel to lubricate the pump. You're talking, Racer, what is it on a diesel? Like 20,000 psi or 40,000 psi from that mechanical pump when it shoots it into the cylinder. I'm not a diesel guy. He's a diesel guy.
Blue Collar Performance used to make and sell some ethanols like the Duke's boys, I'm assuming.
Yep. That's a low proof compared to my stuff.
Yeah. So
my stuff, if you drink it, it'll burn you.
Yeah, talk about the proof and that, 'cause that's what most people are going to have to gauge that by, is by proof.
Well, proof is one of those things. You can get a tester so that you can test the proof of alcohol. It's just a little thing. You fill up a tube and you dump it in there, and it'll float and checks the specific gravity. And wherever it floats, it tells you the proof, right? It's the easy way to do it. And basically 100 proof is 50% alcohol. 200 proof is 100% alcohol. So it's basically half. So 160 is 80% alcohol. Okay. It just depends. And that's how you do the proof. And the proof is just how much water versus alcohol's in it. You don't ever have to worry about water being an alcohol. It just burns it and it doesn't care. So you have to worry about water and gas. That's why you add methanol, ethanol, or isopropyl to gas and diesel to get the water out of the tank that condenses in there from the heat cycles.
Here's another question that's a little related to it. They recommend running a true racing oil with E85 performance and racing. What do you use? Racing oil made from methanol or nitromethane?
10W30.
10W30. You know, it's funny. We have you on, and they say, "What kind of oil is it? Exotic?" You say 10W30. We have John Cope on and say, "What kind of transmission fluid do you run?" He said, "Red."
Red. Yeah. Dexron. Yeah. And let's see. The thing about the oil, all right, methanol does this really bad because, especially in race cars, because a race car goes out, makes a pass, it comes back, the engine's actually cold. When it idles, it just like sucks all the heat out. So you get ice on the intake and everything. Well, the oil doesn't get hot when you're running alcohol fuels. You have to run it quite a bit to get it hot, and you have to have at least 195 thermostat to get the oil hot enough so that it'll boil the condensation out of the crankcase. Because if you don't get the oil hot enough, it's just going to build up water in there and you'll milk your oil. It's like running 160 thermostat in the wintertime. Your heater's not going to work, but you're also going to milk your oil because it's not getting hot enough to boil the water out. Whenever something has a heat cycle and it's got humid air, it's going to be like the outside of a beer can on a hot day, a cold beer can. That can happen on the inside or the outside of something. When you have the temperature differential and you have the condensation from humidity, it's just going to like end up with water in the oil. It does it on every engine. It's just some of them get hot enough. Well, you run gasoline, it's definitely getting hot enough to boil it out because like 85% of the energy in gasoline goes to waste heat. So you're only using this much of gasoline.
Yeah, gasoline
power stuff. Yeah, they're terrible.
They're not thermally efficient. That's no. Mater, so he brings up a good point here. Go to the liquor store, get some Everclear to dump in the fuel tank. How does the ethanol, E85, and the homebrewed stuff compare to what you would see, say, straight vodka?
Depends on the proof. Everclear is not 190 proof. You cannot drink 190 proof. You can't. It will pull all the moisture out of your mouth and burn your throat going down. You do not drink 190 proof. You can kind of drink 160 proof. It sort of works. It doesn't taste good at all. Most beverage alcohol still has a bunch of solids, water and other stuff, fruit juice or whatever in it to give it flavor. They do a low proof so that you can actually like taste it. And that's why Brandies are all done in a special still that's kind of like a pot still. It's a little bit less than a moonshine still. It's a low proof, but they want to have the flavor from whatever they made it from, whether it's, fruit or dates or whatever. And it's just how much of that stuff is still left in it. Mine, it comes out clear. It looks like water, but you drink it, it's definitely not water. You put it on your hand and you get a cold spot wherever you put it.
Craig here says, I was doing small engine repair in lower New York. We get snow drought machines to sit for a year or two unused with 10 to 15% ethanol will get gummed up, and he uses seafoam and Marvel mystery oil. What is your take on additives in general for the fuel system?
Well, if I'm running my homebrew, I don't use anything. And the 10% and the E85 already has enough additives. I'm not putting any more in because I don't want to have something, stacking or, because like tolerances when you're building an engine or doing any machine work, if you're all at the high side, then eventually the last part's not going to fit because everything's on the high side of the tolerance.
Right.
If you do that with additives and then you get an interaction, you can cause even more problems. So I stay away from additives entirely. Although I did put some Mr. Oil in my truck because I had a lifter hanging up, but I put it in the oil. And otherwise, let's see, additives. Oh yeah, the 10 to 15%. They don't put the best gasoline in the 10 to 15%. That is like 70, maybe 80 octane crap. It's like the lightest stuff that they have. That's why we have the Obama cans that try to keep it from vaporizing because it's all the light stuff. It's just the light stuff out of the crude when they distill it. And that stuff likes to go off whenever it feels like it. It's got a high volatility and flash point. So they don't want that escaping. They could make it with the better stuff, but then it gets harder to light. Like toluene. You smell toluene; it's a paint thinner.
Right.
You'll know exactly what it smells. It smells like race gas.
That's the original Mopar Performance Injector Cleaner.
Yeah, and that is incredibly hard on aluminum, rubber, cork, all that stuff. Toluene is really bad. It's worse than methanol if you get enough of it. But the problem with letting 10% sit is they have the crap gas, which varnishes real bad. The ethanol, it also evaporates because it's just light stuff. So you're just left with gunk and varnish. The ethanol will evaporate too, like Tony says. And then you have all the additives. If you have that yellowy stuff or the white chalky crap, that's additives. That's not ethanol. If you can let a bottle of vodka sit until it evaporates and there will be nothing in it. It completely evaporates. Well, the only thing that'd be left would be like whatever they had mixed with the alcohol and, like flavorings, things like that. So if there's no flavor in it, like my 200 proof stuff, well, 190 proof, I don't ever bother with the last little bit of water because whatever. But the 190 proof stuff I make, if you let it evaporate, it's just gone, and you just have a really clean thing of whatever it was in. There's nothing left over.
So Cultured Redneck Garage is asking a pretty in-depth question here. You can go wherever you want to with this.
That's a fun one.
Yeah, but it is a fun one. Can you explain why ethanol and turbos go together?
This is one time that it would be really, really beneficial to have Motor Trend on Demand, unless they've put the episode of Engine Masters up on YouTube. I don't know if they have yet. They took a big block Chevy and they ran it on pump gas and ethanol. And it made like 800, almost 900 horsepower on pump gas. And then they put a blower on it, a tunnel ram. They put a tunnel ram on it, then a blower on top of the tunnel ram, and they run on pump gas, race gas, and E85. And the E85 made like 1,200 horse. And it dropped the inlet temperature underneath the blower by more than 100 degrees. It's kind of crazy. I think I got a picture of that, but I don't want to look for it right now.
Wow. No,
100-degree drop under the blower.
That's extremely significant.
Yeah, that's why it works so good. Now, the interesting thing that I've been playing with, throttle body and carburetor injection, they have a distance in between the where the fuel's introduced and then the port or the valve, right? And you've got port fuel, which is trying to handicap for gasoline by putting it as close to the valve as they can get it, or direct injection, which just puts it into the cylinder. You don't have much time when it's that close to the valve. If here's the valve and here's the injector pointing at it, that's not a lot of time when you're at like 4,000 or 5,000, 6,000 RPM. It's just like, so it doesn't get you time to vaporize. But what I'm doing is, since I've got Pontiacs with long runners, that's why they make torque, I want to put the injector further up the stream so that I can run the intake nice and hot and get everything to vaporize. And that way I can get more mileage and power out of it, because, Tony did a thing on his channel about gas engines don't run on vapor, but they actually do. If you've got a globule of fuel, the outside of it's burning until it goes down, and it has to vaporize for it to burn. Because liquid doesn't burn, it has to, off gas. So once it off gases, then it burns. Now, if you can send it into the chamber as a gas, and a whole lot more dense than, say, methane or hydrogen, then you can get more out of it. You can push it harder, run more compression, get more power, get better mileage, because you're using some of that waste heat to do the job that it needs to do inside the cylinder. So you're just speeding it up. So I want to build, basically I want to put a tunnel ram that I can heat up with the EGR circuit and with the center riser, heat up the entire tunnel ram so it gets nice and toasty just like the rest of it. and then dump alcohol into the top, and it can battle it out, trying to cool it off and heat it up at the same time. And I want to see how much mileage I can get out of that. I might do it with a Ford or a LS motor, because I can get long intakes for them.
BNR asks a question about acids being generated. It's a question running a product running E85.
Now that would be leftovers from the stuff that they put in it.
What kind of stuff are they putting in it specifically? Do you have any idea?
I've talked to some guys that worked in fuel plants, and they said they just dump barrels and barrels into the fuel as it goes through, before they mix it with the gasoline.
Of course, they don't tell the people what's in the secret
No,
sauce.
they don't tell you.
Yes.
I don't even have a clue what it would be. I haven't been able to find anything about what the white chalky stuff is or the yellowest stuff. And I've seen green and yellow. But anytime you see like rust or the chalky stuff, like if you watch Old Man's Garage or Street Racing Channel, they do a lot of E85 stuff. And Bill pulls his carb air and he shows the underside, and the screws holding the throttle plates on are rusty. He's like, that's just what you get with E85. And it's like, you don't get that with 100% ethanol. You get that when you have additives in it. As long as you're getting it hot. If you're running it cold, yeah, you're going to get water condensing on things if you're running it cold. You have to get it hot enough that everything evaporates.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that picture in the thumbnail is one that I got from last time of your carburetor had been apart for 7 years.
Yeah. Well, I had a picture of a Q-Jet that had sat for a while after running gas. It was one that I built, ran on pump gas, and then I let it sit for 2 years or 5 years, something like that. And then I built a E85 carb, ran it for 3 or 4 years, and then parked it and moved it sparingly. So, fill it up and move it around the yard and just let it evaporate out. And the E85 carb was spotless. The gasoline carb was just a wreck.
Yeah.
I had to get in there with my bead blaster and clean it out.
Speaking of that busted radial garage here, he's going to a blower on his burnout car for this year. So I don't know. He might be a good candidate.
That would be really, 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 really good for you to run the E85, because it's inexpensive. You don't use as much as you do with methanol. It's not hard on parts. You can run a lot more timing, a lot more compression, and you just keep throwing fuel at it. You can run, it'll run all the way down to 5-to-1 air fuel ratio.
Wow.
7-to-1 is usually the best power on E85.
So that's a good place to touch on this from Mopar Note 62. Gas will always have more BTU. So why don't you talk about how the volume of one versus the other, gas versus ethanol, the volume you're using and the heat and the fuel. The
BTU is one of those things that's kind of like a red herring. It's like misdirection. It's like, oh, look at the BTU. It's like, British thermal unit is heating 1 pound of water 1 degree, how long it takes. That's what a BTU is. So they measure how long it takes that fuel to raise the temperature of 1 pound of water 1 degree. That's all it is. It doesn't give you octane. It doesn't give you latent heat of vaporization. It doesn't say how much compression you can run, any of that. Gasoline wastes 80 to 85% of its energy as waste heat that you have to shed through the radiator, the exhaust, and it just heats up parts. Ethanol has 40% efficiency. So 40% of the fuel actually goes to moving the vehicle. Now you've got 30% difference between the BTU on gasoline and ethanol, right? But if you have an engine that has 60% of its fuel being used or going to waste heat, and it's making a lot less waste heat, and you have one that has 80 to 85% of it going to waste heat, that BTU thing doesn't really matter. It doesn't apply. It's just kind of a red herring, kind of oh yeah, you shouldn't use this because, the reason why it gets worse mileage is it's in a low compression engine that's handicapped for gasoline, because gasoline doesn't anybody that's tried to run iron heads with 12-to-1 is going to find out that pump gas isn't going to work. you'll rattle rod bearings out of it or crush ring lands or something. It's going to destroy things because it's trying to ignite while the piston's coming up. Ethanol waits until the spark's there. So you can actually run a lot of ignition advance with it too, which is kind of cool because it actually burns faster, but it's more of a softer explosion. So gasoline has a big spike when it hits. You know, you ignite it, it has this big spike, and that tends to break things. Ethanol is it's a softer explosion. It still has a lot of power to it, but it's a softer one. It doesn't shock parts as hard. It's kind of hard for me to describe what's going on, but you know, your engines last longer when you run the alcohol, especially if you're really pushing them. What
I would imagine, you know, your oil would be cleaner itself too, provided you get the moisture out.
Oh yeah. If you if you run straight alcohol, you make it yourself, you put it in the barrel, you let it sit, it doesn't go bad. 12-year-old Scotch is a thing. And you make it yourself. You don't put anything else in it, no gasoline, nothing like that. You run it through your car, your engine's never going to wear. You will, you know, have a mechanical failure before you wear that engine. You know, you'll break a rod or something spinning it too tight. There's no carbon deposits, no black crud all over the valves, nothing clogging up the rings, nothing fouling the oil. When you drain the oil out, it looks just like when you put it in. It's the craziest thing. I've seen videos of taxi cabs running around Brazil and they've got 1 million miles on them. You take them apart and they got less wear than a 30,000 mile gas engine. And they're running hydrous ethanol. It's like 80 to 90% gas, you know, with 10 to 20% water in it. The more water, the less power and mileage you get.
Now, in what application would you want to have gasoline over ethanol, availability aside?
Winter.
Yep.
Because wintertime, ethanol doesn't like to vaporize under 40. It's hard starting under 40 degrees. And 20 degrees, it's like almost impossible. So when it's 20 or below, you just, you know, you got to have some other way to do it. I'm working on a methane system where because I make methane to run my stills, put it in a nitrous bottle, have a line running up and a solenoid with a jet that I can just like spray methane in until the engine catches. And then once it catches, it's making enough heat, then it'll run on ethanol. But that's the only time that I ever want to deal with gasoline. That's why my winter beaters all stay on gas, because I just don't want to deal with it. Yeah. So, Scarlett says winter. What's that?
Yeah. He always likes to rub it in that he lives, you know, in a nice warm place.
Well, it was 40 something today.
Thump Er lives up on top of the world, quite literally.
Not quite.
Close
I'm closer to the North Pole than I am to the equator, but
yeah.
Not quite the top of the world. You know, my buddy Richard Guido, he runs a 65 twin turbo, 5-speed, 65 GTO and drag and drive events. He's down in Florida, or he's driving to Florida right now to do Sick Week. He lives up by Red Deer, which is way the hell up by Alaska, and he drives his GTO all the way down through all the snow, Montana, down to Wyoming, and then down to Texas, and then over to Florida. And he just did the one out on the West Coast. What was it? December? Whenever it was when they had the West Coast version. The guy's nuts.
They got some real warriors that run their stuff.
Yep.
I remember the last time we had you on, we were talking about the way you make it, because you make your own, right?
Yep.
So you're running your own stills and whatnot. I thought that was fascinating. What you're using to make it, what's on the property, how you make it. So NSB says, how would you test something to see if it's viable? I think this is just a good. Tell us about your program of how it's made, because I think it's fascinating.
Well, first you need sugar, because yeast eats sugar. They don't really eat starch. You know, yeast like little short chains, because they're just little microbes. They just absorb stuff, and then they piss vodka and fart CO2. And that's basically all it is yeast pee. And
be a good t-shirt.
Yeah, yeast
for your
pea.
channel.
You know, have a big blown engine. Yeast pea. Ah! I might do that. That'd be pretty good. If I put a blower on one of my cars, I'll do that. I'll take a picture of it, put it on a T-shirt. Yeast pea.
Yeah.
And that's where you make that, and they die off when you get up to 10, 20%, depending on how hardy the yeast are, ethanol in the mix. So you need sugar, starch. Starch works if you have an enzyme, which you can get easy to convert it to sugar, and then the yeast can eat it. And then you just wait, keep oxygen away, and you just wait. And then you take it out of there and you strain out all the solids. You put it in your boiler and you heat it up. And then as it goes up the column, it condenses on either the packing or the plates and drains back. So the water keeps coming down, the vapors keep going up higher, and it becomes more and more ethanol the further it goes up. So as long as you keep the top of the still at 173, you only get ethanol out of it. But you can only get you can get down to 4% with a really, really efficient still, but usually 80 to 90%, you're good. You can run with that. And I can do 90% with mine. And yes, it is prepper stuff.
So what
you can definitely take all of my race stuff and turn it into prepper stuff.
So last time we talked about cattails and things like that, and your preferred things to make it from, and how much you actually need in volume of land and what the yields are.
Yep.
Can you tell us, like, what is your, if you want to be farmer thumper for a minute, what are your yields like for land usage and such?
Well, if you got an acre that you can turn into like a marsh, or just like, well, I got cattails growing in my yard, and it's not even a marsh there. It's just like they're springing up. They're hardy plants. Let's call them that. They're friggin' weeds. But if you have 1 acre, you can make 1,000 gallons real easy. If you take the waste runoff from like a feed lot, chickens, hogs, or just have your own, sewage, like your septic system, have that flowing into the little marshy area where you have your cattails growing, then they can make 10,000 gallons an acre. So they just get huge. You can have cattails with a stalk on them this big when they're eating lots of nitrates coming off of a feedlot. And then the roots are like as big as my friggin' arm.
I've eaten cattails before. I took a class on edible plants, and I thought cattails was one of the best tasting things you can find out there, believe it or not.
And you can use them to do anything you do with potatoes. You can turn them into flour so you can cook with them, make bread, donuts, whatever. That way you can stay a sweaty fat guy with the donuts.
I thought they were pretty good though. I thought that was my favorite of all the different leaves and the white parts of grasses and the odd things we tried. I think that was my favorite.
But even if you live in the desert, like down in Arizona and New Mexico, if you got mesquite and they got those little pods that go frickin' everywhere, and they got like 3 to 6 seeds in them, you just take those seeds and knock them out. You grind them up, make fuel, so you can make it in the desert as long as you got some water. You're going to have enough water for the yeast to live in it.
I like this. This is pretty good. Pick your preppers carefully. Mike Ivins says, what do you use as fuel for your still?
Methane. Methane is super easy to produce. You can make it with recycled plant matter, through a cow or through people or whatever. That sort of waste makes methane with one microbe. And then you have the other sort of methane that you can make with plant material, which is actually what's in our guts that, dissolve the plant material for us and makes methane. Because everybody farts, even the girls that say they don't. But you don't want to mix the two. If you've got poop and you've got plants, you don't put them together, because then the microbes are going to fight with each other and you won't make as much methane. You either go full poop or you go full plant material, wood chips, grass clippings, mulch, whatever. And the smaller the particles you can get, usually the better. and that kind of like ties into the heat system I'm setting up for my shop. My shop's too full of engines, transmissions, and other people's cars right now for me to set up the heat system. But basically, you take a big pile of wood chips and you put plastic sprinkler tubing through it, the 2-inch, sprinkler stuff, and you put about 600 feet through it. You put it in a big pile, you soak it real good, and you go, you put a 1 foot of wood chips and sawdust down, then you put a coil of this tubing, you go up another foot, and you just soak the thing as you're going. You have walls on it and some kind of way to kind of hold the water in, otherwise it runs out, I found out. Then it makes 140-degree water for 6 months. You put 40-degree water in one side, it comes out 140 on the other side. And then you can run that through baseboard heaters or radiant floor or whatever like that. And if you put a tank in the middle of it, like one of those big square tanks, and you fill it 3/4 of the way full with wood chips and whatnot, and then the rest of it water, and you put a little hose off of it, that makes methane for the entire time. And then you can use that to make fuel or run your generator or cook stove, hard start for your car in the cold.
Now, Mopar 62 mentions, he says, takes a lot of time to do the work. So what does your time commitment look like, Farmer Thumper, when you're doing these things?
Well, when I get my marsh built, I'm building a marsh for my cattails. It's going to be two 1-acre plots. Since I live on basically a big chunk of sandstone that goes down about 300 feet, I'm just going to dig all the dirt away, throw a bunch of crushed rock down, and sand on top of that. So that'll keep it from flowing out. Then I'll just throw the cattails in and let it kind of like become a marsh that I can walk on. So I'll be able to just go out and just yank them up, cut the bottom off, take the root, cut the root balls, throw them back, leave the seeds, throw it all in a bucket. It takes about 2-3 days to prep everything, get it all set up, and then about a week to ferment it, and a weekend to run the still, depending on how big your still is. If you got small stills, it takes forever. If you got big stills, it goes fast. So you want a decent sized boiler. You can do it with 55-gallon drums if you want, but you're going to be making a lot of 55-gallon drums because you can only do 20%. So if you got a 20-gallon drum, you're going to get 2 gallons out of it with the turbo yeast. And if you use baker's yeast, you're going to get 1 gallon out of it. So, or no, it's a 10-to-1. So you'd be getting 4 gallons out of 20 gallons or 2 gallons out of 10 or 20.
I would imagine, like anything else, the more experience you get doing this, the better you'll get at being able to manage the time and increase the yields and so forth and so on.
And the yeast are sensitive to pH of the water, the things that you're feeding them. You want to make sure that nothing else gets in there because you can make acetone or some really, really nasty stuff if the wrong microbe gets in there and takes over the yeast. So the cleanliness is a big thing.
This is a great question. I remember we touched on this a little bit. Not that, recycling.
I don't keep track, UP.
Heavens Mopars, are you able to legally sell your fuel?
Technically, yes, but I don't because being a crippled vet, I'm not allowed to make money. So,
and you use your stuff.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing is you have to have a permit from the ATF, and it's free. You just send it in, and you got to tell them, where your stuff is, how protected it is. You can't just have it sitting out. You have to have your storage and everything fenced in, security, because people shouldn't be coming and getting it. And if you use it on site, you don't have to denature it. You can just run moonshine in your generator and your vehicles that you don't take out on the highway. If you take it out on the highway, then you're supposed to denature it so that, you're not moonshining. Because one of the things they used to do would be like just have a 40 or 60 gallon tank. They'd have their moonshine. They just like siphon some off the tank. And then, that's how they did it. They drive around on it and sell it.
Thought about that way.
Yeah. So they made us, you have to denature it. And usually people just put gasoline with it. The stuff that I make smells terrible intentionally. So you really don't want to try to drink it. I make sure that it smells bad.
B&R is asking, he has 2 sets of quick fuel E85 metering blocks for his Holly 4150. To make this a more general question, talk about carburetor modifications in general from a gas carburetor to be used in an ethanol application.
Well, I have a set of those. I got them on a 780 vacuum secondary carb, the one off of a Ford 428 that had dual metering blocks, power valves. I get a better result by just modifying the blocks myself. The Holly is real simple. You increase the idle circuit. It depends on how big it is, at the start as to how big you go. You can increase the emulsion tubes, but whenever you add more air in the emulsion tubes, you're actually leaning the mix, and you want to richen the mix. So you go with a bigger jet and you make all the port or passages a little bit bigger so they flow more. You have to open up the boosters. Straight legs, it's easy. You just stick a drill in it, go, but the down legs, you got to change the down leg, and you can get a tool to change the boosters on a Holly. And then the accelerator pump, you got to make sure you get enough of a pump shot. It's just like basically increasing the flow on everything. Sometimes it's 30%, sometimes it's 20%. Sometimes it works just the way it is. Like watching Andy's video on dual quads. When I have dual quads on my tunnel ram, I don't even bother messing with the 4-corner idle. I don't make it bigger at all. And it idles great just on the stock one, because you're dumping a ton of fuel already. Because it's supposed to be 1 carb doing the 4-car, but you got 2, and you're dumping it into basically 2 4-cylinders. So I don't have to modify the idle circuits at all to run dual quads. So that's handy.
Jabo asks an interesting question. Any idea what, quote, town gas is? From what I gather, they used it for lighting over 100 years ago.
That was ethanol. Cities used to make their own, and they used it for the street lamps, making electricity, all kinds of stuff, powering the city vehicles. Yeah, before 1920, the vehicles all ran on alcohol.
And Danny Boyd is saying the town gas went out in the 1920s or 30s around here in Cincinnati.
Yeah, because Prohibition. Yeah, John Rockefeller decided that I want to be able to sell my gasoline to everybody. The toxic waste that I call gasoline, that runs like crap, wastes most of it in heat, and likes to just ping on, 5-to-1 compression. So he's like, how do I get people to buy my crap? Well, I'll just send $4 million to the temperance movement and get alcohol outlawed.
Well, if you want to find the enemies of most things in history, you just look at the money on the other side.
Yep.
And usually will take you right to them.
William Randolph Hearst with hemp.
The hemp, and paper, right?
Yep.
Right.
Hemp and alcohol, that's the 2 big ones, Rockefeller and Hearst. 2 guys with way too much money. They just had their own ideas, and they're like, well, screw everybody else. I want to make more money. So, and all that propaganda and stuff is why everybody thinks alcohol is bad for your car. Well, natural gas, Dan, is interesting because it's you got the same problems with gas and hydrogen. Like if you watch Tim Pool, who's on right now on his channel, he's got Ian that's always going on about graphene and hydrogen. Well, the kid doesn't realize that you lose a ton of range with hydrogen, and it also likes to seep through things. You got to keep it liquid to get any range out of it so that you can actually get it dense enough. But if you have liquid hydrogen or liquid methane in a tank the size of a 20-gallon gasoline tank, it's about the equivalent of having 3 gallons of gas in it. So you lose a lot of range. Now, if you have a big truck like a bus or something like that can have a huge tank and has a short little route that it runs, and then you just fill it up again when you get to the end, that works good. They do that in Iceland, because Iceland, they can get hydrogen real easy because they got geothermal, because they live on a frickin' volcano. So, just run it down a little bit. Hey, we got heat. So they make all their electricity with geothermal. And then they can just take that and then just turn water into hydrogen and oxygen. And then the vehicles combine it back together and make water again. Because that's what happens when you run hydrogen or ethanol or methane, and even methanol. The only thing you make is CO2 and hydrogen, or CO2 and water, or just water. Hydrogen is the one that makes just water. The others make or hydrogen or make. Ugh. I'm talking fat, or I'm talking slower than my brain's going. Brain's going 500 mile an hour, and my mouth is going, well, we're just gonna be Mr. Magoo here. But okay, hydrogen makes water. The rest of them make water and CO2.
Say hi to Tall Garage. He just landed, and BNR has a question. How is throttle response for you with E85 and huge CFM carburetors?
Do you like getting your neck snapped? You get the tune right, it's a beast. You switch to E85 and you get a good tune, like from Mark, you will never want to go back to gasoline. You'll just be like, whoa, this is amazing, and it's cheap. And Mark's carburetors are better than the ones that you can get from Holly or Quick Fuel or any of them. You know, he's got it really well scienced out. I've known him for almost 20 years. You know, and we've been figuring it out. He's been doing nothing but E85 carbs in that time. And he's got a little, I think it's a 16-to-1 small block in a Monza. I think it's a Monza. It's some small car. Could be a Chevette. It's something small. And it's like an 850 car. With just a small block naturally aspirated running his carburetors.
Now, Tall Garage brings up something interesting. Asked in a very Tall Garage way, I might add. I like seeing all the old boomers complain about the E content in gas, and it's funny. You know, why don't you, if you would, touch on the difference between like the E85 and E15, like that balance of what it means when they blend the two that way.
Well, like I said before, the ethanol isn't causing any problems. And E15, if your car will run on 5% ethanol, you know, it'll run on 100%. The compatibility is there. You know, you don't get problems with compatibility if you go up in it. You know, the way the chemical works, if it's good with 10%, it's good with 100. It doesn't care. The thing where you run into problems is the temp or the tune. You have to have enough fuel, or else it tends to buck. You know, it goes like if you go way too lean on a carb running gas and you're running a 4-speed, you know, and it surges and does all that crazy shit. That's what you start getting with ethanol.
Oh,
but
that...
the gasoline is the problem. The additives in the gasoline, because all that crap just sitting there in your tiller or your lawnmower, it's gumming up that carburetor, because those carburetors have two jets. They've got an idle jet and they've got a high-speed jet. That's it. And, you know, that's why they just set them up to just run 1 RPM now. You don't have accelerator pumps. You don't have multiple jets, multiple passages. It's idle and let's go rock and roll. That's all there is. Carburetors are stupid simple and they have small holes. So you get a bunch of yellowy, waxy crap in them and they quit running.
Say hi to Blake from Bad Tree Productions. Unfinished project. Put up the link for Mark selling carburetors. Mopar Nut 62 says lawn guys hate ethanol gas. So what is your take on 100% gas versus, say, E10? And I know that you say it's the additives, but how does that play?
Yeah, you know, if you're one of the guys that's out doing landscaping and stuff, run the 93 that's no alcohol. It's not the alcohol, it's the problem. It's all the crap they put in it. Now, if you want to get a little bit silly and start making your own, you can do that with the grass clippings.
I guess you could, yeah.
You know, you got to break them down. You got to do an acid bath, kind of like you're going to make paper out of them. And then once you break it down far enough, then the yeast can eat it. But, you know, if you mulch it real good and then basically cook it and break up the long chains and lignin, then you can get it to turn to sugar and you can make fuel from it. Now, the cool thing about small engines, if you restrict the airflow into them, you can run them straight with no modifications on the on ethanol. You can put 100% in them it doesn't hurt a damn thing. And if you want to run your chainsaw on it, you got the carburetor that's adjustable, so you can do your air fuel mix on the high speed and low speed on a chainsaw. You crank them all the way open, maybe open it up a little bit, and then run it on a mix of castor oil and ethanol without gasoline. It'll run great. Smell like corn, smell like French fries because of the corn oil. A little bit harder to start when it's cold.
You're saying that even the E10 stuff, it's the additives and the ethanol in that 10% that are your problem.
Yeah, ethanol doesn't hurt the gaskets or the rubber bits or anything. It's all the additives. And if you're driving around with 50-year-old plus gaskets and oil or hoses and stuff, that's a fire hazard no matter what fuel you're running. You can't even buy the old stuff anymore. I haven't even found a kit that isn't compatible in the last 20 years. I had one from the 80s, a Q-Jet kit, and the accelerator cup didn't like it. Other than that, they've been fine. If it's good with 10%, it's good with 100.
What would be the things to look out for to know if something is not compatible? Like the carbs, gaskets, etc.
If it's built in the 40s.
Okay.
And it's completely original. 40s to early 60s, and it's never been apart, never had any kits put in it. And the race quality stuff, they're putting race gas in with it. Now, the interesting thing is they put gasoline with ethanol to make it light, ignite easier when it's cold. That's the whole reason they put gasoline with, any 85. Race gas is designed to not ignite. You have to have a heavy spark. You're trying to get past that threshold where it goes, I'm just going to explode now because I'm hot and I'm squishy, right? So race gas is formulated to try to get the octane high enough that it's not going to ignite on its own. Ethanol ignites whenever you light the spark. So you have the race gas and the ethanol kind of working against each other. You got two different flame fronts because of the two. It's just not something that I really want to, deal with. And they want like just as much for race E85 as they do for race gas. And it's like, why bother? I'd rather just get some E85, whatever percentage, put a gallon of water in it, siphon off the gasoline, and then just run it as like, 90%.
Now, we mentioned that it's not like people will tell you what additives are in gas. It's like the credit score formula or some of these, the recipe to Coca-Cola. They're not just out there. People can only guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what, and as you travel around the country, the gasoline changes. When I went I joined the Air Force again back in 2000, and I drove my GTO from Nebraska to South Carolina. When I got to South Carolina, I couldn't get it to run right. It was overheating and just running like complete crap. I had to go through and redo the entire carburetor. Had to reset everything, do the timing and everything else again. Everything had to be different from the gasoline in Nebraska to the gasoline in South Carolina. So it was just, and I said, okay, fine. I just tore it all apart. I went through and I put it together and I figured out, what I needed to change to make it work right. It was a lot of fun trying to figure that out. It was about 3 months of messing with my carburetor on the kitchen table every night just to see if I could get it to run right. So the gasoline changes wherever you go. The further north you go, the more of the light stuff they're going to put in it. So you're going to get worse mileage up here in Michigan than you would in Florida, because in Florida they have to put the heavy stuff in or else it all evaporates.
Never thought about it like that.
Oh yeah, fuel injector, everything stays clean with ethanol. If you run straight ethanol, your fuel pumps, the fuel tank, everything, it just looks spotless. It's brand new. You take it apart, it looks new. The gasoline's what causes all the problems.
J-Bo says, thank you for your service. We were discussing that before we went live.
Yeah. I had fun for the most part when I wasn't being worked to death or shot at. I needed a job I couldn't get fired from most of the time.
Dougster says E85 is 110 octane straight from the pump.
Well, they rate it that. It acts like way more than that, like 116. The octane rating doesn't really work good because they have a 1-cylinder engine that they use to test octane, and it's got a variable compression ratio. They can like make the chamber smaller. It's a funny looking Briggs and Stratton, like a really old Briggs and Stratton. And they test the fuel with that. Alcohol doesn't really work that way because it doesn't want to ignite with just heat and pressure. Gasoline will. Diesel, that's all diesel runs on, is you squeeze it hard enough and it's hot and it goes off. But ethanol, it doesn't want to do that. So they say it's only like 105 octane, but really it's like 120, 130. It's just going to wait until you get the spark. You have to get it really lean to get it to pre-ignite or ping or knock.
Moparnut 62 asks, shelf life of 100% ethanol in all weather conditions in the tank.
Longer than you'll live.
So it depends on how you have it vented and so forth and so on.
Doesn't matter. I got 15 gallons sitting in my 70 GTO. The tank's still under it. It's just been sitting out there in the yard. I haven't moved it. Took the engine out in 2018, put it in the 65, and it's been sitting there. I took 5 gallons out and put it in the 65 in 2021 when I ran out of some. It started and ran fine, no problem.
So how does it do over time with moisture?
The proof goes down a little bit. That's all that happens. You don't have to worry about it. If you have 80% water or 80% ethanol and 20% water is where you start to have a problem. It's like years it takes. If you have unanodized soft aluminum, it sets up an electrolysis process which starts pulling the aluminum into suspension. It's a chemical thing. And it starts doing that at 80%, and it stops doing it about, 40 or 50%? So 100 proof, 100 to 160 proof. It's right in there, and that's where you make the least power anyway. So why bother running that much water in it? But if you have that much water in it, it's going to take a couple of years before it's a problem, and it's not going to hurt steel. It's not going to hurt rubber. It's only soft, unanodized aluminum. If you got an anodized aluminum or the zinc chromate or zinc plating that's on carburetors, doesn't care. It will not hurt it. And I have a 5-gallon jug that I found in my old rundown cabin. It was buried back there, and it's got E85 in it from 2009. So I'm going to do a video on that. I might put it in a little, get a Harbor Freight go-kart engine and convert it and then run it on that just to show people.
Well, that's a good segue into this one. And let's ask this maybe a little bit differently. Mater's asking, how will E85 perform in an engine designed for regular gasoline? So let's
make more power, get less mileage.
Yeah, if you just dumped gas in there and did nothing to the engine, what can you expect? And what would you have to do to make it work optimally?
If it's EFI, you sometimes have to increase the injectors because they need to flow a little bit more. You have to increase the air fuel ratio. 13 to 1, that's way lean. It'll run, but it's going to run like crap and not make any power. Best power is 7.5 to 1 AFR, and best mileage is between 8.5 and 9.5. Somewhere in there. Depends on the engine, chamber shape, cylinder heads, material, all that stuff. And you lower compression, you're going to use more fuel and get less power. But you'll definitely get more power over gasoline as long as you get the AFR right. So it's a carburetor swap or injectors and a tune. That's all you really need to do. The other thing is, if you've been running race gas, just take your tank, set it off to the side, put another one in it. Trust me, because race gas is horrible for varnish. I did that with my 79 formula. I put some E85 in it, and I destroyed 3 pumps with all the crud and varnish and crap that just clogged up the filter and then went through the filter and destroyed the pump. So I screwed up 3 blue pumps. And then, screwed up my carburetor, and I had to take it all apart. And Dominator gaskets get expensive after a while. So I was like, okay, and I just took it off, put a fuel cell on it. I don't care anymore. Race gas is just terrible for varnish. Good Lord.
Yeah, Mohawk says I heard a rumor years ago that a vented fuel system would lose a gallon of E85 due to evaporation in a few days.
Nope. Might lose the gasoline in that time, but you won't lose the alcohol in that time. Because, look at all the bars across the country. They got all those bottles sitting there with the little spouts on them that measure how much comes out. And they're basically vented to the atmosphere. They're not losing, bottles every day just from it sitting there. They actually have to pour it out.
Dougster says he served 30% more fuel with E85 or ethanol, or so I've been told.
It varies. I've gotten away on some with 27. Others needed like 32. I just do it with, I tune it with a wideband Innovate O2 sensor. So it has to go down to like 7-1, and 7 to 11-1 usually works pretty good. You can do it with a gas scale one. It'll still read, but you have to know where you're at as a baseline so that you can figure out, and adapt it. And I don't, because the fuel injection that I have, I made a video of it too. The EFI says one thing on its AFR meter, and then the wideband says something completely different. Then I changed the settings on the carb or the fuel map for my EFI, right? And then it still reads the same, but now the AFR on the wideband's different. So it kind of runs it through an algorithm whenever you run on the gas scale. So I like to have the one that just works with whatever the actual AFR is. Lambda does kind of the same thing. If you want to mess around with Lambda and you just want to go this much below or this much above, great. But it's not the way that I do it.
BNR says, do you have to use stainless steel or titanium tipped Holly needle and seats made for methanol?
Nope, not for ethanol. You got to use them for methanol, not for ethanol. And I've never had a problem with the needle seats going bad. And I've been running carburetors for, 2007. What is that? 18 years.
Mike Ivan asks, will E85 get mileage close to gas if you have high enough compression?
12-1, you get the same. 13-1, you get better. 16-1, you get way better.
That's
26-1, way, way better.
because the people who always talk about how the volume goes up, like my cousin's husband said he has a truck that has flex fuel, right?
Yep.
It's Ford, and he stopped and said, oh man, look at the price on that, that E85. He said, man, but my mileage was terrible. But that truck probably had below 10-1 compression.
Yep. 9.5-1 max. Because you can get away with a little bit with aluminum heads. It's basically one more point with aluminum heads and EFI, and NOx sensors. It's pulling timing out if it doesn't get enough gas, But the other thing about the flex fuel vehicles, they have the fuel map set to overfuel it. So it's doing way more than 30%. Some of them are just like, when it sees alcohol, it goes, okay, 30%, over a certain amount with the sensor. And then it just like starts just dumping it. Right. And others, it's just like, yeah, we'll just like keep throwing more at it. And you make more power, but you lose a ton of mileage. And they set them up that way because they don't want you to run it on ethanol because your engine will last longer. They want you to have to go buy another vehicle. Planned obsolescence.
Now, Danny Boyd says, my Fox 5.0 had less power and used more fuel on the ethanol gas. However, you're also putting in ethanol behind a gasoline tuned and setup too, I would imagine, and your compression for gas and so forth. So it's not necessarily an apples to apples comparison.
No.
But that is interesting that Danny Boyd says for people who want to know what happens if you just dump ethanol in behind the gasoline and try it.
Oh, yeah, you can mix it with it. You can splash mix it. LS engines, 40%. They kind of start hitting the lane bank code. 50%, they definitely hit the lane bank code. E85, it's like super lean bank code. It's like, oh wow, this thing's running way too lean. Depends on the Ford. The old 5.0s, I got away with 20-30% before it went, whoa, there's a problem here. If it's a carburetor, swap the carburetor. It just depends on it. But yeah, there's lots of things you can get more from corn. More than corn. Corn does about 250 gallons of ethanol per dry land, not irrigated. And irrigation gets it up to about 500. So there's lots of things to do better. It's just the cool thing about corn is, one, we're already making a ton of it. Most of it's used for cattle feed anyway. The cows can't can't digest the starch, so they just, all the microbes in there that can digest the starch turn it into methane, and then the cows fart and piss off AOC. Right? So if we take all that starch that's in the corn and use it to make fuel first, and then feed the leftovers to the cattle, all that stuff they can digest. They don't fart as much, making AOC happier, and they also gain weight 17% faster, according to the University of Iowa, on eating the DDGS. So we're actually making more food by making fuel from corn first. And what the hell else are we going to do with the corn? I mean, we have billions of bushels just sitting around rotting every year because we can't get it. We have so much we can't do anything with all of it. It's crazy.
It's funny you mentioned AOC. I remember when I first did a video on the dash in my race car, it had this really ragged, almost, it's in sheet metal, but almost looked like it was a torch cut hole for one of the gauges. And I said it looked like AOC cut that hole out with her teeth.
Yeah.
And I had people, no politics. No. I'm like, it's not politics. It's somebody with,
Yeah,
teeth
it's
like
somebody
this.
in the public domain.
Whoop-de-doo. Like, all three of her fans on Earth are not subscribers here anyway. I'm not worried about it. Functional History's checking in while he works on his little cars. Thanks for joining us. Andy from Unity Motorsports Garage says, I love E85, but it's hard to read plugs because they look like they just came out of the box.
Yep, you can't tell. You got to look for a little tiny, very faint heat ring. Put a wideband in it. Call it good. Put a wideband. Put a bung in each. Put a bung in each header collector, and you got to have about 16 inches, 18 inches after the O2 for it to read right, so it's not getting reversion in between the pulses. But
I gotta say, I've never been big into the O2 sensor and the wideband, but Dallas Brown, Andy Wood are two people who told me why I should be.
Yeah, you definitely should if you want to run, and be able to tune stuff. Even if you're running gas, an O2 sensor will tell you so much more than reading plugs.
Say hi to Mean Street Mopar. He just stuck his head in. Thanks for joining us, Ken.
Because reading the plugs tells you what it's doing at full throttle going down the track. Because you put them in, you go up there, you make your pass, you shut it off, and you read the plugs. It's not telling you how it's driving everywhere else. So if you're doing carburetors, where do you spend most of your time driving a carburetor? 2,000 to 3,000 RPM. Unless you got, a little small block like my buddy Racer, who likes to spin them to the moon and drives around with like 7,000 RPM. There was a Chevelle that he had his buddy Chevelle he drove for a while, and he had like a 3 or 3,600 stall, something like that. And it was hilarious because he's driving around and I think it'd go back to idle when he wasn't in it. Right. So he and then let off of it, go back to idle, and he's cruising along and then stomping again. We had a lot of fun in the 80s.
DNR's asking on your street cruisers and moderate horsepower Pontiac V8 engines, 350 to 400 street engine, do you still use a factory dual plane exhaust crossover or block it off 385? That's a good question. So are you still preheating the intake with the crossover or not?
Well, you pick up more mileage and the power stays the same if you have the intake heated. And it also runs a lot better when it's cold. The 65 right now, I've got a set of 67 670 heads on it. And I had Butler port those back in the 90s, and I had them fill in the crossovers because you couldn't find ethanol back then. So I ran it on race gas, and it made a difference for race gas. I picked up a couple of tenths from filling in the crossovers. Then I had them do a set of 48 Ram Air 4 or Ram Air 3 heads, and they milled those so that they'd be 64 cc's, which gives me the 13-to-1 with the flat top and the 0 deck. And they ported them, I think it's like 10 CFM more, which is almost irrelevant on the 48s compared to the 670s. And I didn't have them block off the heat riser because I built those specifically to get the most mileage out of a 455 with 13-to-1 compression. So I wanted to heat the intake and also the air coming in. So I did that, and I got 20 miles of the gallon out of my 70 GTO driving around with 13-to-1, a 342 gear, 700 R4, and that was mixed city and highway. So that's pretty decent for, something with over 550 horse and 600 foot-pounds of torque with a carburetor, a Q-Jet.
No kidding. Barrows joins the chat. Thanks for joining us. He's leery of all the stuff they put in the fuel. Moparnut 62 says 1 bag growing year and you're down. Also, Moparnut 62 said the world is made from crude. Also, Moparnut 62, you don't eat crude. So what do you eat in the down growing year?
Well, that's a cool thing about cattails. Man, yeah. I could just drive along and show you just, how many miles and miles of cattails grow in the ditches. And, if you don't want to use cattails, then you can make it from waste paper. Have you ever been around the backside of a strip mall or a store like Walmart or the grocery stores? They have cardboard and paper and stuff just bundled up and stacked, sitting there waiting to go to the dump. Yeah. You can take that, shred it yourself, put it in a water bath to kind of like get it to break down, throw an enzyme in it. It's sugar, make fuel. A buddy of mine does that in Wisconsin.
The Dollar General Market down here for me they have a shredder on site that shreds all their boxes and binds them up. Mm-hmm. And they'll have this giant square of shredded up boxes that literally is the size of a roll-off container. And when you first see it, it looks like a big box, but it's not. It's all this shredded up boxes.
Yep. It
just comes out that way. And I'm like, man, what a lot of waste.
You could be grabbing that, getting yourself a couple of big cattle tanks, go down to the Tractor Supply or wherever and get these, couple 100-gallon tanks, put them in there. There's a certain process to get it to break down, but usually you just soak it. You soak it, you put the enzyme in, it changes it, you raise it to 140 degrees, shut off the enzyme, put it in the still, add the yeast, or in the fermenter, add the yeast, come back in a week. So even if you have a bad growing year, there's paper.
Tall Garage likes tuning and gas. Scale keeps it simple, but likes to learn. And that's the thing. That's the whole point of this live stream is we're just learning something different. And, it's cool. It's good that we get to learn different things.
Yeah, I just like going with what it actually is rather than trying to convert stuff and put math into it. Because it's like, just tell me what the hell it's doing. If it's running 7-to-1, great. If it's running 8-to-1, I want to know. I don't want to be like, well, 13-to-1 on this scale is actually like 8-to-1. I don't want to deal with it. I'm not that good at math.
So Unfinished Project put up a link. I'm assuming that's to making it. Say hi to Tony's Hot Rod Garage. He's in the chat.
I think that was your channel because I don't have one on how to make E85.
Could be. Well, no, I think it's there.
Because I make straight alcohol. I don't put gas in it. Unless I drive around off my property.
Yeah, he says homemade E85. So you make homemade E100.
Yep. And let's see. Racer asked me a question earlier.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. He says lots of great information. In the South, does nothing special. Says I can use kudzu. Yeah, there's an unlimited supply of kudzu.
There's a guy in Florida that's been doing that. He worked it all out. And he's been making ethanol from kudzu since about the same time I started. He started a little bit before me. And that stuff grows a foot a day with just sunlight, pulling moisture out of the air. So it doesn't need to be water or anything. So you just go out, hack it off the trees. It's an invasive species. Hack it off the trees, prep it, put the enzyme in it, change it to sugar, fuel.
Moparnut says, hey, I'm all for making your own fuel, but we don't all live in the land of the free. Well, then fix it. You fix your state. I'll be on second shift. Your state doesn't even allow you to pump your own gas, right? You're in New Jersey. Right. So I get it.
That.
I know. I get it. But it's like we can't all just work to whatever an authoritarian state allows. Here we go. Homemade E100. There we go.
Yeah, and that I think that was just like a little short one. It's like take sugar, take flour, add enzyme, add water, add time, alcohol.
DNR says, I've never seen Reed vapor pressure specs for E85 at the pump. I don't know what Reed vapor pressure specs are.
No, that's how prone it is to evaporating.
Okay.
Essentially. I don't worry about that stuff. And if I'm making
the devil.
Driving through the South, I was like, good Lord, what is this blanket over this green blanket over all the trees? And I went, oh, that's kudzu. I'm like, oh, yeah. And then a kid figured out how to make fuel with it. And I'm like, go catch you some kudzu.
Portnet says there's no fixing. They're coming for all of us. Well, awesome. Well, while you wait to die, the rest of us are going to make our own fuel and do what we want.
Yep. You know, and when everybody else is like, oh, man, I can't afford this $12 gas or $20 a gallon gas, I'd be like, I'm still driving around my hot rods with dual quads and superchargers and stuff.
Yeah, they list those for 110 to 120.
Yeah.
Well, and race fuels. And unfinished projects is what they don't know won't hurt you. I think the less they know tends to be the better, but I don't like to volunteer things to them.
Yeah. You don't want to be like, oh, hey, that's why I haven't made any pictures or videos of like actual stills and stuff yet, because I don't want, I don't want the popularity.
Right.
But I'm working on it. When I get everything set up for the new location, because I'm having to rebuild everything. I got the shop and the house done. Now I got a couple of cars done, so now I can work on other stuff, like my pond for the cattails, so I don't have to go out and dig them up out of the ditch.
Buff Del Campo asks, how much gasoline to make it denatured?
How much can you stand to drink? The whole idea is to poison it. You can poison it with anything. Rat poison, diesel fuel, gas, doesn't matter. Methanol. So you just have to be like denatured alcohol, because otherwise somebody come by and then just drink your fuel and they dead.
I'm for, though, a society where we don't worry about people who drink the contents of the battery and things like that, because the world was a better place when it was a more dangerous place, right? Yep. I mean, Darwinism is a valuable thing. It weeded out the worst of the gene pool.
Remove the safety labels and all the airbags and just let them sort itself out. You drive around on an old 40s car, there's no seatbelt. You drive around an early Mustang or a GTO, you hit something, stick a fork in you, you're done if you're over 40 mile an hour. And 50 mile an hour tree will kill you.
Oh, my Pornut 62 says make it undrinkable. Well, I mean, but the thing is they've been doing that with nitrous forever. Putting sulfur in it.
Yep, you can do whippets. Get a little bit.
Jack Stands and Cinderblock says we can do better. Sure we can. Those people don't want to.
Well, Racer, there's other channels that do the distillation thing. They tell you how to do it. There's one guy, I watch him. He does completely beverage stuff. So how to, the way that he runs a still, he tells you how to do the mash and all that. He's really good. I'll probably put a link to his channel on my community page if somebody reminds me. Hint. And he tells you how to do all of it and how to set it up. And then, he's got a small still. If you're going to be making fuel, you want 1,000-gallon boiler. That way you can get 200 gallons per run. If you're running the good yeast.
And Colleen is right. People paid attention when things could kill you. People were hardier.
Well, the ones that didn't pay attention got Darwin Awards.
Right. And I mean, that's just the way it is. We've made stupidity such a fiercely protected class now that is a lot of the problems we're having.
Yep.
It's really that simple.
You know, when they have to have a sign over the urinal says "Do not eat the big mint."
But see, those people are protected for their votes, and that is a huge problem. So I liked it when the world was a more dangerous place, back when you needed to have at least, some amount of intelligence. In fact, the military is not supposed to draft people with an IQ below 83 for a reason.
Yeah.
We've taken all those guardrails off, and we're paying for it now.
Yeah, the world was a better place when it was dangerous, and that's why I live where it's dangerous.
Now, Aunt D says, just got here. Did you say you were using cattails for fuel?
Indeed.
So for those who were not here earlier,
the roots and the lower third of the stalk has a lot of starch in it. You take them and you slice them up, and then you bash it out of there. You can use rocks or a press or whatever, just something to get it all out. You just knock it out, and then you throw away the husk, which is this fibrous dark yellow stuff. The starch is white, so you can tell which is white or which is starch and which isn't. You can beat it with a hammer, just something to knock it out of there. And then you put that in a bucket or a vat, and then you add alpha amylase and beta amylase, which turns it into sugar. Then you can put yeast in it and make fuel.
Dean says Darwin Awards didn't happen before Darwin. Sure they did. They just weren't named as such. It was called getting eaten by the lion because your spear wasn't sharp. We had that Darwin Award since the beginning of civilization. What are you talking about?
Yeah, the mess with the wrong guy award.
Yeah. Cultured Redneck Garages. I knew the world was doomed when we outlawed three-wheelers. He's right. He really is right. It kind of symbolized a freedom of choice going away to coddle to people being able to operate. And we've seen this in cars. We've seen it in everything.
All of us guys with gray hair, we grew up in the world where we'd like be laying on the package tray in the back of our family car or in the back of the wagon or something, picking our nose and looking at the cops following us.
Mm-hmm.
The car seats came around later.
Colleen said IQ of 83 grading on the curve. Yes, that's literally exactly what they're doing. Yes, it's exactly what they're doing.
If you can't pass the ASVAB, you've got an 83 or lower. And the ASVAB is a really simple test. I won't say what I got on it.
I've read that people with 2 standard deviations of intelligence difference start to begin to have communication problems as a result. And I would say legitimately most of the people in this chat and in this community are 2 deviations or better than 83. And it makes sense when you start watching.
Yeah, Racer learned a lot from my mistakes, although we don't get pulled over anymore when we go out for a drive. I just think we go where the cops aren't now. And also we were in the middle of the daytime. We can see further when we went out and tried to do a burnout with the 5.9. And driving around on a deserted or a not really finished an open highway in the middle of the night, that was a little bit obvious. That was the last time we got pulled over.
Chris
got a lot of stories.
He says, I still have a trike. Just need to know how to drive it on 2 wheels. There you go.
Yeah. I want to build one of those like drift trikes. I was looking at axles and stuff for it on Amazon.
Dizzy Izzy put up a comment saying that, are you unhappy about the 20% inflation we've had under the current president to our food prices? Yeah, I sure am, Dizzy. Check that out. I fixed the spelling. He said it was a spell check thing, so I tried to fix it.
Well, they won't let you say certain things.
No, I'm having fun with that. I don't have this horrified aversion to politics, like NBC having the F word and freaking out over the censor. It's not like that, but it's just not a topic here, but I'm also not afraid of it. And I laugh about it. I don't care.
Wendy's home. Hi, Wendy.
Is Wendy home?
Yeah, Wendy's
home. All right. we got to know this every live stream. Old McDonald says that we drank out of lead-filled garden hoses and colored our walls with lead-based paint. We did, and some people did have problems from that.
Yep. Some people ate the paint chips.
That's right.
And their kids were like, but I like the paint chips.
This is true. This is true. And so we got rid of lead paint in 1978. And to this day, I still have to disclose it. And eventually they're going to get rid of that. I mean, how long are they going to say a house still has original paint from when it's 50 years old, maybe? I don't know.
I don't know. I built my house in 2019. But no, actually, I built this house was here when I bought the place. Yeah, it was here when I bought the place.
Let's see here.
What else we got?
Danny Boyd says, I ate the lead weights out of some curtains when I was a kid.
It didn't hurt you at all, Dan.
I completely believe that, sir.
Yeah, the high voltage lines did improve the flavor of the paint chips. This is true.
This one I'm just going to rate stamp for false straight there.
Well,
purposefully took a wrecking ball to all of the trade improvements we had in the first day, and we saw the exact result that we expected.
Yeah, the whole reason the gas is coming down now is because the industry is going like, well, we still want to make a bunch of stuff, and
Hey, old McDonald,
they don't have to worry about getting fired because everybody else went. Ooh.
I will take up for our commander in chief here. Old McDonald said, if the military wants no one with an IQ under 83, how do we get our current commander in chief? Well, one, military service is not required to be commander in chief.
Yep.
And two, I don't believe Biden has an IQ under 83. He just has dementia. So that's, I wouldn't pick on a person for having dementia.
Yeah, I figured he was around 100, maybe 105.
Now, Mike Iben, our resident torque converter whisperer here, says the Romans put lead in their wine to sweeten it. I've never heard that. That's interesting.
They also had lead pipes providing their water. So that's why their civilization kind of went. All their plumbing was lead pipes because they didn't have copper. Well, they didn't know how to work copper yet.
Big Block 402 says we need more wire on the border. I stand with Texas. Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
I was rather impressed to get a little political here. Sure, Fetterman, who couldn't string 5 words together, last year, I saw him on the news and he was actually coherent and it didn't look like he was reading from a teleprompter.
Did they have him all hyped up on drugs and stuff to do that?
It didn't look like it. I mean, he wasn't twitchy and, it didn't look like one of the meth heads down there at Home Depot or anything. But, I think he's like actually healing up. So I'm like, cool. And he actually said stuff that I didn't disagree with. So I'm like, wow. Okay, sweatshirt guy. All right. I wear hoodies. I'm big. He wears hoodies. He's big. Okay. Yeah. If he's not a commie, we're good. Oh, yeah. Flint has wonderful water. When I go by Flint, I don't drink the water. Fuel pumps for E85. No problem. Whatever. I've run Walbro 220 liter and 220 or 255 liter inline pumps on my EFI. And Holly Red, I ran a Carter 7-pound, 1/4 inch in and out. Looks like a little pot with a couple of barb plugs on the top of it. Ran that for 10 years. After running for 20 years or 15 years on E10. So doesn't matter. Pumps don't care.
That's good to know.
Well, that explains a lot, Mohawk.
Mohawk says I used to play with mercury on my school desk. Yeah, and that's true. That kids used to get to play with mercury. That was unheard of by the time I was a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
I'd heard of it, but didn't actually. Scarlett reminds us that Colonel Mustard used a lead pipe in the library.
I used a revolver in the bathroom. Don't ask what I used it for.
Yeah, I wasn't. Big Block 402 says I may have a couple of pints of DDT in the shed, old farmer's stash. Yeah, there's stuff still floating around out there. But
the amount of 2,4-D that I ingested on the farm and all the other stuff, I'm surprised I'm not just riddled with tumors right now. I honestly am. all the stuff I've been exposed to between the desert, 2 wars in the desert, all the burn pits and the chemical weapons that we blew up in the first one, and then all the stuff on the farm, and then all the automotive stuff. It's like, how am I still alive? I must be like indestructible. I just keep getting bigger.
Some people, you know, some people get hit, some people don't. You never know how it's going to play out.
Yep.
True, Production's back in the house. How's it going, Blake? Yeah, mercury field temperature gauge in our mouth. Yeah, that was a thing.
Well, I got a mercury sitting outside. I got to get it running. I mean, everybody's bugging me. Get the Cougar going. And I'm like, I got Pontiacs to do.
So what Colleen is talking about here says, are you a computer guy, Thumper? You might enjoy what Scarlett has cooking. So Scarlett, the 4-eyed Cuda, is putting an ECU on his carbureted 71 Barracuda.
Cool.
So that he can have an OBD2 hookup to read a wideband and stuff. That's what it looks like. I was looking at it. I didn't peruse it in detail, but that's what it looked like he was doing on his channel. I thought that was interesting.
Well, he could put a Mega Squirt on it. That'd be pretty easy. Mega Squirts are neat. You can get them assembled, or you can solder them together yourself and then fight to find out which one you didn't solder right.
Yeah, that's true. He's also running in the No Name 500 this year. So we wish Scarlett all the best in getting his 500 subscribers. And go over there and check it out. If one of the mods would pop up the link to Scarlett's channel, that'd be cool. We can all check it out at our leisure. But I think that is an interesting, innovative thing. I'm not saying I would do it, but I think it's cool that he's doing it.
I'm kind of a computer guy. I learned a little bit of programming, CNC programming in the 80s and 90s. You know, stuff that they don't even need to know now, because my brother does machine work, and it's just like, I just draw it and then it makes it. I'm like, you don't have to put in TLOs or anything else. But the computer that I'm talking on, I built in 2018 or 2019. I just go and get all the parts and assemble them, put a OS on it, and make it all work. So pretty much whatever I need, I just build it myself or figure out a way to do it. So computers are there. And I just bought a nice new joystick so I can go fly.
Yeah, Racer there corroborates. He says Scarlett's data logging system is a cool project. He has a video. I don't know if it's out yet, but it's coming out. And yeah, check that out. And old McDonald says he would take a Cougar over a Mustang. And Steven says, I'd take a Cougar, but I'm married. So
yeah, Cougars for me.
For each other there.
Cougar for me, that's like a 70-year-old, and it's no, not happening.
Yeah, I guess it's relative, isn't it?
Yeah, you know. I'm almost 55. Not happening. Oh yeah, so, Racer, are you 59 or are you 60 yet? But there was also another question.
What it's interesting you mentioned that. So you and 38 POS Racing, Racer Ray as I call him, you guys grew up near each other in Nebraska.
When I was 16, yeah.
Right. And so a lot of people don't know. So this is where I guess Thumper first got his love of corn fuel, living around all that corn, I guess. But so you're originally from Nebraska before you moved to the Arctic Circle up there.
Yep. Oh, he asked what job I had in the Air Force. I was an air transportation craftsman when I got out. And I was air cargo technician when I went in. So I was a 605 X1 and then a 2T271 when I got out. And basically what you do is you take cargo and then you put it on a big pallet and then you net it and then you see how much it weighs and then you put a little placard on it and then someone else takes that and they put it on a load plan where the heavy ones are in the middle and the lighter ones get, towards the ends, and then you put it on a K-loader and then you drive it out to the airplane and you shove all the pallets on by hand. So that's how I got this.
Now, it's interesting. So there's other interesting things about Thumper himself. That Thumper, the sweaty fat guy, is a channel username. And I know it probably makes people conjure up images and so forth and so on. I don't know if you're using it as a social filter, but I've met you in person. And I got to say, you're not what you would envision from that username. We were talking a little bit at Sykeston. You said you're still benching. You benching 5 or close to it?
The last time that I tried it, they only had 400 pounds in the gym, and I put that up 3 times like it was nothing.
Yeah, it's just incredible. What are some other things people wouldn't know about Thump Er just from YouTube?
Well, I pretty much tell everybody, but I don't know. Divorced twice, been to somewhere around 40 countries, got 2 kids.
Wow.
Grew up in
Wow.
Nebraska. I've been to around 40 states. I can tell you which ones I haven't been to. It's easier than telling you the ones I've been to.
What ones have you not been to that you want to go to?
Alaska.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I've been to Vermont and Connecticut, but I haven't been to New Hampshire, Maine. What's the other one up there? Delaware. Haven't been to Delaware, and I have zero intentions of going.
Yeah, I was going to say, no one wants to go to Delaware.
I flew into New Jersey once and then flew back out, and I was very happy to leave. Haven't been to California or Arizona. Idaho, Montana. I've flown over them. Other than that, I've pretty much got the rest of them except for Alaska and Hawaii. And I'm wanting to go to South America. I'd like to go to Antarctica before I die, but probably not going to happen.
What's your bucket list like? What you want to do with cars? Let's just say the next 5 years. What do you want to do in the next 5 years with cars that you haven't done?
Run 850s on the street and scare the living hell out of myself and everybody around me.
Okay.
I'd like to get my bucket list vehicles are, you can kind of see them back here, 69 Judge and a 41 Willys. That's my dream cars. And I have a 69 GTO. It's not a Judge, and it's not really a GTO at this point, although it does have the right VIN. There's just not much left of it, but we'll fix that. I have a welder and a Sawzall. Rust fears me.
38 here says loaded question. Yeah, don't worry. I just find it interesting that you guys you're from nearly the same place.
Yeah. Well, he knows a lot of my background that I won't bring up on here.
Right. Sure.
Because, if I started talking about certain things that he and I both know, you would get your channel whacked.
Right. Oh, fair enough. I get that. That's cool though.
Well, that's because it wasn't running for so many years there, 38.
Well, we have 12 minutes left, so I should mention there is a place we can totally make that happen. Just saying.
Yeah. Well, I just got to get a car.
Just saying. But no, I think it's cool that I do think it's really cool that we have both you guys in the community, and I don't know, it's just interesting. It's interesting. We don't see maybe quite as much in person. I really enjoy 38 POS Racing's channel. I remember the first video he ever premiered was it was like head bolt removal on a big block or something. I said, this guy's legit. So
yeah,
I thought that was cool.
He's school bus rated, heavy diesel mechanic, works on everything from tillers and lawnmowers to, $500,000 combines. They send him out on service calls to talk to irrigation motors, talk to the ECU and make them run right. Dude knows what's up.
Oh yeah. He is really knowledgeable. Fun to have a conversation with him. Cool guy. Very much so.
His dad was just awesome. Me and his dad used to talk about flying and stuff all the time.
Yeah, Dallas and I found his channel when he came to No Name Nationals and made that trip. Like, this guy's interesting, really. Anyway, he's one of those folks.
Yeah, and you look at the two of us. He's like what, 6'10", and I'm like 5'1".
That's
the way it looks.
It's funny you say 6'10" because Tall Garage's brother is 6'10".
Yeah,
Tall Kyle.
He's only like what, 6'3", 6'4", something like that.
When
but I'm
they
5'8".
When they were at the first No Name Nationals, I figured I thought, well, I'll certainly recognize Ken because he'll be a head taller than everybody, right? And sure enough, he walks up with his brother, and he's the shorter of the two. I wasn't expecting that. Jack stands at Cinder Blocks. Thank you. I appreciate that. Heavens Mopar says, I've got all my dream cars, but they will all be tributes. Can't afford the real deals. You can do it, man. Cope is reminding us that there is more than corn. And then, yeah, Cope is coming here. This is where Cope is hanging out, for Tony's live right here.
Now, 38 did find a 41 Willys. It was a four-door sedan, but he found one. It had the right front end and everything, but he wanted to actually make money off of it instead of hooking me up for, a modest fee.
Brother Tall makes me feel way short. Yeah, I could see that.
I don't know if I can handle that many more G's, Mopar. I am a heavy dude. I am compact.
Short people live longer.
I don't know.
Get the worst of both worlds there.
I am enormous. If you've met me, you're probably like, been pulled into my gravity well.
Aunt D asks, would you build one of the fiberglass Willys?
Yeah. If I could get a fiberglass body for less than 10 grand and I actually had the 10 grand to do it, I would have one.
Cool.
38's dream cars are all 59 Chevys.
Would it be like a gasser style, or what style would you do that Willys in?
A Willys? Yeah, it'd be, even though I'm a hardcore Pontiac guy, it would have a 331, 354, or 392 Chrysler in it. And blown and injected with a 5-speed, 4-speed, manual trans, straight axle, Stonewoods and Cook or Stonewoods and Cook type build, essentially. Just something absolutely ludicrous.
Tall Garage,
I would daily drive it.
Are you finally going with Mopar transmission? It's interesting. Thumper put up the link to your channel.
Yep, that's me.
Anybody else have anything else? We've got a little bit of time left to go. I believe Tony comes on live after me. He usually does. He wasn't last week, but I think he will tonight.
Well, Buff, I don't have my private license, but I can fly, take off, and land an airplane. Been there, done that. Don't ask. And I just kind of like play around with basically video games. Really hardcore flight sims where you have a learning curve and everything. And it's actually, it's not like War Thunder where you can like fly with your mouse. Dean, I like hard things. Difficult.
Dean says that I think he's talking about the hot dogs. They're $85 a piece if you're not a Trump supporter. That was John Cope's tailgate cookout. That was the cost of admission. Yeah, Brother Tall's 50 Windsor needs something robust. Well, you can definitely find it there.
Well, I like Pontiacs, but, something about an early Hemi just says yes to me.
Yeah.
Especially with an 871 on it and, a big old buzzard catcher.
Jack stands cinder blocks. I have a few hours of military flight simulator on a Blackhawk. Well, that's interesting.
Cool. My little brother used to fly Blackhawks, and he was an instructor. He landed the Blackhawk in our family's backyard when he was flying through Nebraska to go to Colorado for mountain training to go to Afghanistan. So landed it out there, and the news people and everybody came out, and there was like this huge crowd. And they got a nice video of him landing, and then, the crew chiefs all hop out, and he gets back in it and takes off.
B&R's asking what your experience is with different fuel line materials. Is there anything specific you would recommend one over the other? And he's talking about E85.
I've basically used the nylon stuff, for the high pressure EFI, like the new cars. No problem. Used steel, have an aluminum one in the 68 half-inch line. Well, it's in the 68 and the 79 formula. They both have half-inch aluminum. I've run the regular, what do you call it? The fuel injection hose that you get from like Napa or CarQuest or whatever. No problem there. And it lasts longer. When I was running race gas in the 79, I was changing out the little rubber connection links that I had because you can only have 12 inches in the entire system to be legal.
That's correct.
So I would have 3/8 line, and then I would have just a little bit of rubber hose, and that was always cracking in like 2 or 3 years running VP Red and Sunoco 110. So sometimes I get 3 years out of it. Otherwise, I was just changing it every other year.
Aunt D found that there is a Willys body that works with an S10 chassis. Well, that's interesting.
Oh yeah, lots of them do.
I'd never known. The S10 chassis is becoming a go-to chassis swap. But there aren't that many early S10s out there, so I don't know whether they're using the ones from the 90s or something. Or
yeah, well, I just drug home a project that is going to be coming up on the channel. If I get enough snow to cover it up, I'll do the what's under the snow.
Yeah.
And I just got a frame. It's a 04 2-wheel drive 1500 GMC chassis, standard cab long box. So really nice shape, no rust. Came from down south. I'm like,
hey, what's down south to you?
Well, technically most of Canada, but down south is below the oh my god everything's rusty line. So bottom half of Kansas, so okay. Oklahoma over to Tennessee.
Okay. Unfinished project wants a small personal helicopter for going back and forth to work.
Well, they do sell them, and you can actually get kits to build small helicopters. There's a company in what is it? Menominee. If you look at where Wisconsin and Michigan meet on Lake Michigan, there's a little town called Menominee, and the other side of it is in Michigan, and down there they build boats for the Coast Guard in a little shipyard they have, and they also have a company that makes helicopters, and they'll custom build you one. So if you got $500,000, just burn a hole in your pocket, get you a little personal 2-seat helicopter. My brother can teach you how to fly it. He'll charge you a lot, but he can teach you.
Well, you're not charging a lot to teach somebody to fly it. You're teaching somebody a lot to not crash it.
Well, with helicopters, for every hour you fly it, there's at least 100 hours of maintenance that needs to be done.
Right, but you won't want to crash it.
Yeah, so that's why helicopters are expensive.
They're teaching you more how to land than how to fly.
Yeah. Oh, and my one flight sim called Digital Combat Simulator. It's a really, really accurate, intense one. I managed to get the Huey off the ground, and then I was flying around with it, and it started to roll over on me. So I tried to roll it back, and the Jesus nut came off the top. There's a nut on top of the rotors. They call it the Jesus nut. It's like this big. It came off, and I just watched the rotor go zipping away from me, and I was like, okay, escape, restart.
Yeah.
Because you're a passenger. He once told me when I was still in, we were sending emails back and forth, and he's like, well, if I'm in Afghanistan and I go in, the chopper's going to crash, I lose hydraulics. Me and the co-pilot, we're going to get up and go strap ourselves in the back. And I'm like, why do you want to do that? And he's like, to mess with the crash
Stephen,
Dizzy's
still welcome in our community in Pitts, even if he's wrong. It's okay. You still like him.
Who's wrong?
Our friend Dizzy. I'm just having fun with it. I would rather have fun with it than get all weird about it, how some people do. So Dougster's saying a super rich bigwig in Amway flew his helicopter to work every day, and he had an hour car ride from work. I can believe that.
Well, the Amway guys can bring in a crap load of money real easy.
Yeah, so Jack Stan Cinderblock says, throwing your link. One of the mods, if you would, you can put the link up here. Tony goes live right after us here in just a minute. So don't worry, we hand off one to the other. So
BNR, how much money you want to spend?
BNR is asking, are those E85 ethanol content digital meters worth the money?
If you like expensive stuff that tells you what's going on, that you're probably going to be like, well, it hasn't really changed much. You know, or you can just like get the little bottle like I got and shake it with some water in it and then wait. You know.
Yeah, and
unless you're throwing a crap load of boost at it and trying to make max power, it doesn't really matter as long as you're over 70%.
this is a fantastic topic, and I'd like to, of course, do this again in the future. You know, we did it once before, and there'll be more topics to talk about, more people running it. Maybe Thumper will have some stuff that he's run since and can talk about, you know, what he did new, what worked, and what didn't, and so forth. So if you like this topic and the numbers say that you did, because we had a lot longer than normal view duration this particular live. So I'd like to have Thumper back on in the future and hit this topic again sometime. And it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate all of you coming out. Also, some quick things to plug real quick. So Tony goes on next. Plug that first. Tony's Hot Rod Garage is live right after this. This Wednesday, January 31st, the new rules for Monkey Bike for the No Name Nationals come out this Wednesday, and we'll be talking about the new rules and the tech surrounding them on the Slant Daily Wednesday Tech Talk Live. I'm the interim guest over there with Professor P. Shane Bolito. We'll be talking about the new Monkey Bike rules, the tech surrounding them, and the new rules will drop that Wednesday. So with that, I want to thank Thumper for being on. Thank you so much. This has been great. The time has flown. It's been really, really interesting.
Yep, it was fun.
Thank you for joining us, and I'll see all of you guys again Wednesday and or Friday. Thanks. We're out.